So what is the meta right now? Well, it's a variety of things. 140 round per minute hand cannons are feeling much better across the board due to the fact that the blanket nerf to 120 round per minute hand cannons have brought them more in line with all their other hand cannons. Shotguns also got a nerf, which has opened up a number of things, which is why today, guys, I wanted to outline weapons that you may have already known are really good, but they have risen in potency in this sandbox. What I can say though about this sandbox is I truly feel like we are reaching a balanced state. Yes, there's some outliers, but for the most part, there are many weapons across different archetypes that can compete. Now, there is no particular order to these weapons, but let's actually start with an all-time favorite for many of us, Ace of Spades. Ace of Spades has seen a huge jump in usage over the past few weeks since the release of update 3.2.1, and that's because Ace of Spades realistically has everything you would want in a hand cannon. It's got a perk like Memento Mori, which increases our crit damage to 90 per crit, which now exceeds the damage of 120 round per minute hand cannons. It's got a good base time to kill value as a 140, sitting around 0.87 seconds, which is not bad. Simultaneously though, it's actually one of the best dueling hand cannons in the game, primarily because Ace of Spades does come with high caliber rounds, which is actually very good. A lot of people just kind of pass it up because we want to go for more stability boosting perks, think things like ricochet rounds, but there are many times in a gunfight where I'm getting flinch and I know that it's because of high caliber rounds, and I'll actually die, inspect my opponent, and be like, oh, well, there's high cal. That's why. Ace of Spades, though, brings that to every gunfight. It's a noticeable amount of flinch. And for the longest time, the only thing that was holding Ace of Spades back was the fact that 120s just had so much more range. Now, though, even max range 120s barely reaches 37 meters. Outside, of course, rangefinder 120s. Ace of Spades actually sits around 34.5 meters. This is incredible, considering it has a better time to kill value than 120s. And even against mid-range 120s, think Loud Lullaby, Ace of Spades far outpaces those weapons. It's no surprise to see Ace of Spades back on the top of the list when it comes to our meta. With a combination of high caliber rounds, the ability to hang on to radar while aiming down sights, the added lethality of 6 shots from Memento Mori, how can you not choose this weapon? Oh, and yeah, it also has Firefly. If you are looking for just a weapon right out the gate that will carry you in trials, in competitive, or pretty much anywhere inside of Crucible, Ace of Spades will definitely serve you well. Which brings us to another hand cannon I wanted to talk about, and that is Crimson. I know, it was the last time we actually even talked about this one. An unusual exotic hand cannon. It's a 3-round burst weapon though, and is essentially Red Death 2.0, as it shoots a 3-round burst and shoots roughly at 415 rounds per minute. It also comes with the perk Cruel Remedy, where it actually allows the wielder of the weapon to heal themselves when getting a kill. And if the kill happens to be a precision kill, it auto refills the magazine. And if you happen to have the exotic catalyst, be ready to look at a range stat of 93 with this weapon. Again, up there with Ace of Spades in terms of its stats. The only drawback to Crimson is, well, a lot of people don't want to use a pulse rifle. Even though this is a hand cannon, definitely fires like a pulse rifle. And for my more dedicated hand cannon users that look at pulse rifles as dad rifles, they tend to point their nose up at Crimson, which amazes me. Both on controller and even on mouse and keyboard, Crimson felt incredible. It does sit at a range of about 33.5 meters, which is still very impressive, and its burst fire nature really tends to mess with enemies. Again, I talk about weapons that have good dueling capabilities. Crimson has that, while simultaneously still sitting at a 0.87 time to kill value. Overall, I think Crimson is an excellent weapon, especially for chaining kills inside of 6v6 modes, and you've been seeing a rise of Crimson usage for certain console players, most notably Xbox players, which I find interesting, right? Like, the meta seems to change even between consoles. You see PlayStation users, none of them are using Crimson, but Xbox users are. Regardless though, I think Crimson for all platforms is a fantastic option. So guys, give this hand cannon a go. Moving on to our next weapon. It was the king of slug shotguns. It has recently probably become the king of all shotguns, and that is Chaperone. This is a slug shotgun with a hell of a lot of reach, although it did receive a nerf alongside all of our other shotguns. Bungie has not actually acknowledged it yet. Slug shotguns were not supposed to be affected whatsoever in the nerf, but Chaperone is looking at about like half a meter to close to a meter less range than what it was hitting before. Regardless, Chaperone can still kill base at 13 meters, and that's before Roadborne. Its exotic trait is even procced, which extends that even further. We're talking 15 meters plus. Regardless, Chaperone is one of those weapons that is so difficult to push against. Take certain maps, even with their lanes. 13 meters is plenty enough range here from Chaperone to easily get the one tap on anyone that decides to peek. And when we looked at shotguns that used to be the meta, that are still really good, Felwyn Felwinter, As Horizon with opening shot, those shotguns still reach up to 7 meters in kill range. And depending on your resilience level, can still touch up to 7.5 meters. Regardless though, Chaperone still far outweighs it. And again, outweighs it post-nerf, when Chaperone and other slug shotguns weren't even supposed to get a nerf. Overall, Chaperone has become the king of shotguns. And I thought duality was going to be my baby, and I still like duality. But in terms of which shotgun has the most reach and scales significantly depending on your skill, Chaperone will win every shotgun duel for you. Moving on to another weapon. Considering we're already on the subject of specials, let's bring up one that no one wanted to hear. Bastion. Ah yes, Bastion. Out of everything that got a nerf, there was one weapon Bungie completely glossed over, and that was Bastion, and probably intentionally so. This is a burst fire fusion rifle. Think of a less sophisticated version of Pocket Infinity. But similar to Pocket, it shreds everything and then some. It can kill multiple Guardians at once. Supers. It can shred Guardians through their barricades. And on top of all of that, it has a kill range at 17 to 18 meters. For the longest time, what has been combating Bastion has been aggressive shotguns. Felwinters. I know they didn't have the range to reach up to Bastion's range. But again, considering our maps and our current lanes, the scenarios that we're faced with now is a guy pre-charging his Bastion, and you come around the corner with your Felwinter, get your shot off, and 9 times out of 10, you'll leave that opponent one shot, which would require you to follow up with a melee. That is plenty of time for Bastion to be fully charged and completely blast you away. It is by far one of the most aggravating weapons to go against, and surprisingly, one of the biggest counters to Chaperone is Bastion, and vice versa, one of the biggest counters to Bastion is Chaperone. Overall, I'm actually curious to see over the next few months, as this sandbox continues to evolve, which one of these special weapons is actually going to win out more. Regardless, both of these special weapons are very deadly. Now, moving on to arguably the best submachine gun in the game, this is the Trials SMG Shayura's Wrath. Now, fellas, there is an adept version of this weapon, and I know this is a Trials weapon, but to be perfectly honest with you, even the base version of this weapon that you can get from 3 wins inside of Trials is more than enough. Shayura is the king of all SMGs. The weapon has the most updated loot pool with perks like heating up and tunnel vision. But really what makes it nasty is that its base stats is just superior to all other SMGs. On top of that, it falls within the 600 round per minute archetype, which is one of the most manageable archetypes for submachine guns. But if you were to land the adept version of this weapon with very high range, and you even wanted to stretch it further with one of the adept range mods, Shayura can actually reach up to 29 meters before receiving any type of damage fall off. That's incredible. Even the godliest roll multi-max that I have that has things like arm reach and zoom modifier scopes can only reach up to 25 meters. And again, this is much higher than all other submachine guns. For the longest time, one of my favorite energy submachine guns was the Ikelos SMG, but even Ikelos had a tough time even touching 20 meters, if even that. Shayura goes well beyond that point and is one of the most manageable weapons in the game. Moving on to another weapon on this list. This one is for the more skilled hand cannon user, and that's actually Hawkmoon. Ah yes, Hawkmoon kind of took the back seat in comparison to many hand cannons, and that's simply because 120s were so overwhelming. Yes, Hawkmoon had lethality with Paracausal Shot. Yes, you can one-tap with Hawkmoon, but it had 2 things working against it. Number 1, it required you to aim a little more with it in comparison to other hand cannons. Like Ace of Spades, there's so many times I shoot people in the hip and it gives me a crit. Hawkmoon, though, does require you to line your shots up a little more, and that's probably due to the fact that the base range of this weapon does come in less, reaching damage fall off at about 31 meters. Now, you can counter this slightly with perks like Opening Shot, which also increases the accuracy of Hawkmoon. And that's one of the beautiful things about Hawkmoon is that it can come with random rolls, or at least some of the traits can be randomly rolled. And if you actually want to boost that range up by another 2 meters, you can actually get it randomly rolled with Rangefinder, which will increase that zoom. Overall, one of the beautiful things about Hawkmoon is Paracausal Shot, where you increase that damage with every crit that you land. Meaning on the back end, when you start to get further into the magazine, depending on how many crits you previously landed, you can easily either get the 2-tap or the 1-tap. And I gotta tell you guys, that caca is one of the sexiest sounds to hear inside of Crucible. Also, landing 1-taps with Hawkmoon is one of the most satisfying things to see. Surprisingly, whether intentional or not, Hawkmoon actually became one of the best weapons to counter cheaters, as you would land a couple crits when you would peek in and out of cover if you so dared, and when you finally got enough enough paracausal shots acquired, you would lean out and get the one tap on the cheater. Overall though, Hawkmoon does have a little more skill required to really get the most out of this hand cannon. But for those that actually sit down and learn this hand cannon, it will absolutely wreck many other weapons in the game. Speaking of weapons that are wrecking in the game, at this point I'm starting to wonder if this is just a hand cannon meta review, because the next weapon I want to talk about is one that has been consistently buffed just about every single sandbox, and that is the Last Word. Now guys, Last Word has received so many consistency buffs that have kind of been more targeted, at least here recently, for mouse and keyboard players. But for my controller guys, they are reaping the most benefits from these buffs. And that's because Last Word, within its optimal range, has one of the best time to kill values at 0.53 seconds. It's deadly guys. It shreds. It fires from the hip, and even for mouse and keyboard, it feels a lot better. But inside the hands of a controller user, Last Word is a whole nother monster. Similar to almost like Bastion in a way, or even Chaperone. Sometimes whenever I run up against a good Last Word user, I really feel like my only option is to run away. Like seriously, I just run. You almost have to reset that gunfight every single encounter, because if you are not outside of that 20-meter range, that Last Word is about to shred you. Now, Last Word did get some counters previously because of shotguns. But now the shotguns got nerfed, and now that 120 round per minute hand cannons got nerfed. Things are getting closer and closer to Last Word's optimal range. Now, the next weapon on this list is another Trials weapon, which I know some of you probably won't like, but it's actually the Messenger. The Messenger is by far the king of all pulse rifles. Listen, I love No Time to Explain. I've got a God Roll Stars and Shadow. My Sacred Providence, I still pull it out of my vault and give it a spin from time to time, sure. And weapons like Time Worn Spire, Grid Skipper, even Vigilance Wing, they all feel good. But Messenger does take it to a whole nother level. And that's simply because this 2-burst, 340 round per minute pulse rifle can roll with the perk Desperado. This essentially cranks our rounds per minute up to the equivalent of rapid fires, essentially 540 rounds per minute. It's insane because it doesn't drop the damage whatsoever inside of PvP. There's literally no better weapon when it comes to taking on large groups of enemies. It is by far my favorite weapon inside of 6v6 modes. No matter how nasty Redrix's Claymore or Redrix's Broadsword was, Messenger exceeds everything Redrix was. It's consistent, it feels good, it handles well, it has a base time to kill value of 0.67 seconds, which is one of the best, and even though it actually starts to experience damage fall off at 42 meters, it can actually continue to 2 bursts all the way up to 47 meters. And again, we're just talking about its base. Once you get Desperado rolling, it's GG. It's actually amazing to me that Bungie gave us Desperado, and they gave it to us on such a good weapon. One of the big things about Redrix was that it was kind of inconsistent. It also had those blinders on either side, right? You had difficulty seeing your targets with Redrix, but that was like the pros and cons of Redrix, right? The pro being you've got a deadly perk like Desperado that will shred everything. The con was the weapon was a little more inconsistent and you couldn't see anything left or right while aiming down sights. But Messenger doesn't have those issues. It's also way more consistent. It's got a clean sight, which equates to more 2-burst kills and more Desperado procs. Call it the dad rifle, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. Messenger's nasty, and I will continue using it for pretty much everything. Now, a couple honorable mentions. I think Thorn feels pretty nice, especially with Soul Devourer. However, understand, Thorn is very limited in its range. We're talking a range of only 30 to 30.5 meters. Even with the 120 round per minute hand cannon nerf, Thorn still faces heavy competition from other 140s. I actually wish Thorn could have just stayed at 150 alongside Sunshot, considering its optimal range. As for other weapons that are feeling good in this sandbox though, you've got Adored, you've got Reese Walker, you got Dire Promise, even 120s are still feeling really good, like Igneous Hammer, True Prophecy, and if you happen to be playing on Stadia, surprisingly, Dead Man's Tale is still meta over there. And here on PC, you still got people using DMT, and we actually did a breakdown of Dead Man's Tale the other day, post-nerf. Regardless though, guys, in this sandbox, there is some more diversity, more than what we were previously faced with. And I know a lot of people will say that hell, it still looks like a hand cannon shotgun meta. But even in game modes like Trials, I find myself using other things. I'm dabbling with grenade launchers. I'm messing around with fusion rifles. I'm breaking out Lord of Wolves in 2021. So no, the sandbox is never perfect, but I would say that this sandbox definitely offers the most variety. So guys, let me know in the comments below what you think. Break out some of these weapons, try them for yourselves, and have fun. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.